please welcome the panel on advancing deaf education and employment in China.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kathy Johnson. I'm from Minnesota. I am the director for the Center of International Disability, Advocacy, and Diplomacy, or known as CDAD. And I will start speaking now.
Thank you. So I'm here today with my colleagues from China, and we will be talking about their experiences as visiting scholars at St. Cloud State University, which is in Minnesota, but our history with the Harkin Institute in Des Moines, Iowa goes back a few years. So we started, actually my first journey to China was almost 25 years ago in the summer of 2000. And that was with Gallaudet University. It was a life-changing experience. And if you're having trouble finding me in that picture in the top left, I'm down in the bottom corner. That's me with the big green hair. You'd think it was the 80s, but it was 2000. Since that time, we have taken delegations to China that focused on deaf education and employment to China. And in 2017 and 18, we actually had 2 Harkin Fellows awarded to Dr. Zheng, Z-H-E-N-G, for our interpreters, and Dr. Amy Knopf, a colleague from St. Cloud State University at that time. Then we worked with 3 deaf interns in 2019, and one of them was also a mentor, who is Xiaorong, who will be sharing her story today too. So each of them will be sharing about one essence of deaf education and deaf employment as emerging leaders. And really what we're talking about is deaf diplomacy. We also have our colleague Todd, McKean, who is from Apple, who will share more about the details of what Apple is doing in China. So again, the first partnership, here you can see our colleagues, Dr. Zhang, Z-H-E-N-G, from China, and Dr. Amy Knopf, who is sitting over here with us. And at that time, it was Director Joseph Jones. So they did great work, both of them studying cross-culturally deaf education and employment in each other's respective countries. So deaf diplomacy in action, again, we have this amazing dream team, I call them, of deaf scholars at St. Cloud State, and each one of them will be sharing their story and an aspect of the research that they've been completing at our institute. First off, we have Shengquan, so his name sign, Shengquan Wang. He's our youngest member, and he's really excited to be on this panel, right? A little nervous, maybe. But we're very happy to have him be here. So, Shengquan, can you share your perspective on deaf education and employment? Deaf education is your topic.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shengquan Wang. I am an Asian Chinese man with black hair and glasses. I also have a mole on my face, which is where I get my name in sign language. I also have a gray shirt. I am a little bit nervous because this is my first time presenting in another country in front of an audience, as well as using American Sign Language. This is my 3rd language and my first time presenting using American Sign Language. But as I've gone throughout the day and seen the other presentations, I have felt empowered and able to do this, so I'm less nervous now. I'm from the northwestern part of China. That area is more farm country. It is not as fast-paced as the east side of China. We are trying to become more fast-paced, but it is definitely slower-paced there. In the northwestern part of China, I studied at a deaf school from elementary age through high school for 12 years, and then I went to the eastern part of China for my college education. After I graduated, I came back to work in the deaf school teaching language. So as 12 years, first 12 years as a student, and then a total of 3 years as a teacher gives me 15 years worth of experience. Deaf education has room for improvement, partially because there is no sign language used in the classroom. And if it is, it's not accurate. Many of the teachers use spoken language, and it's very easy to misunderstand what's being taught. For myself, I get about 30% of what's being taught in a classroom because it's not taught in sign language. I know that other deaf students also face troubles like this, and that the approach to education needs to change because of those difficulties. We also have seen that deaf schools throughout China are decreasing in size and lowering in enrollment. Oftentimes, deaf students are in classrooms with hearing teachers who do not use sign language. So one of the reasons I came to America with the help of Kathy is to study and research at St. Cloud State University. What's unique about being in the state of Minnesota is they have the Minnesota State Academy for the Deaf. And as I've visited, it's in a smaller town in Faribault, Minnesota. And when I went there, I was able to share my Chinese culture and language for a semester. It was enthralling for me to do this, to be in an environment and a school where I had access to the language. All of the faculty and staff and teachers, including the superintendent and every other employee, use sign language. This was empowering because deaf people in this space could do anything. I also spent time observing high school education. I also shared my culture and language with those students. I was also able to join in other classes part-time and see how instruction for the deaf worked and take note of that. The deaf instructors there are able to provide instruction in ASL from the moment students come into the school. And when I sat and witnessed this, I recognized that learning in general, naturally, with sign language, helped solidify the information that was being learned, which was a very nice benefit. I think that the system here in the US is wonderfully set up, and China can learn from what has been established here in the US. We have a little ways to go. So some of the things that I have noticed that are challenges in China are things that I'd like to bring back in ways we can improve. I've also learned that in China, there are 3 deaf schools in total. The superintendents of the deaf schools are often in charge, making decisions for the entire school. But they do not share information amongst each other between the 3 schools within China. The challenges continue. So I'm using my experience here in the United States to bring back what I've learned to help improve China. Because I believe the deaf schools specifically in China, can thrive. My time here is unfortunately coming to a close. At the end of January, I will be going back to China, and I look forward to bringing the wealth of knowledge that I have gained from my experience here to continue the deaf education system in China and see it thrive. Thank you.
Next, we will have our colleague, Wei Lu. He will be talking about equity and access to communication for deaf citizens.
Hello, everyone. Like Kathy said, my name is Wei Lu. I have black hair. I am Chinese. I have a dark green shirt on, and I am profoundly deaf, and I'm male. It's so nice to meet you all. So I am a university-level sign language instructor. I'm most interested in researching education of interpreters and development of the deaf community as a whole. I feel responsible in the work that I do to encourage improvement in all services in those realms. I'd like to thank Kathy very much and CDAD and her group for offering us this wonderful opportunity for us to be able to come here to America at St. Cloud State University as visiting researchers for this past year. When we arrived, the first thing we did was dive into ASL and English. We learned as much as we could for 4 months. We traveled over the United States to learn about the interpreting education system, how deaf communities were set up and educated in different states. We learned as much as possible to set the foundation for our time here. Kathy encouraged us to be involved in as many things as possible at the university, to sit in and observe classes, to go to the deaf associations and deaf schools, as well as interpreting centers and video relay service providers as well. So taking all of that in was very thought-provoking for our team, especially identifying the differences between America and China, the accessibility services that are provided. The ones provided in the US are top-notch. It was very inspiring to see the level of accessibility that the deaf community has here, and it was empowering as well. I'd like to talk to you about interpreting education in China. We have about 20 million deaf people, a very large population of the deaf. People learn and work in environments where they face lots of challenges if they are deaf. They have barriers to access to communication. They have barriers in education. They have barriers in employment. They miss a lot of information, and communication is not clear for the deaf community as a whole. As a foundation for the access that they have, we believe that the interpreting field needs to be looked at. We only have a 15 to 20 year history so far in China of interpreter education, whereas in the US, it's about 65 years old. And so they have a really good foundation, and it's something that we can learn from to change the way we do interpreter education in China. And so that's been something I've been mulling over and thinking about very deeply. There are very few professional interpreters in China. If we look at research and numbers, in America, you have 1 interpreter for every 15 to 20 signing deaf people in the US. So in China, comparatively, you have 1 interpreter for about 1,000 signing deaf people. So the gap is very large. We have a long way to go, and we really need to focus on a solution to that problem. In China, there are only 3 universities that have interpreter training programs. They face lots of challenges within those programs. There are not enough teachers in the interpreter education programs, and there's not enough support from the government financially. Often, interpreting agencies are established, but then quickly close because that government support is a one-time gift of money versus recurring ongoing funds. In 2023, an accessibility law was established called the Law of the People's Republic of China on a construction of a barrier-free environment. That includes provision of communication access and things like that. So we're excited and hopeful for the future that that law will help us move forward in resolution. And we're hoping with the 2 and 3 months we have left as a team that we can gather as much information and experiences as possible so that when we return to China, we can set up a deaf interpreting task force, if you will, and talk about different methods of interpreter education, maybe new textbooks, new curricula that we could share with one another to make sure that the deaf community is on par with the Chinese society as a whole. We're hoping to continue to partner with America for the growth of our interpreter education programs. We're very hopeful for the future that hopefully we'll have more and more interpreter education programs pop up all over the country to provide support and accessibility services to our 20 million deaf people so that they can, again, thrive just as their peers in society at large. That's our dream, that's our goal, and I appreciate your time.
Next is one of my old friends who I've known now for almost 20 years, Guowei, Yang, and he will be talking about the ecosystem's impact on deaf citizens. I hope you enjoy. It's a lovely presentation.
Thank you, Kathy. Hello, everyone. My name is Guowei Yang. I am a deaf man with black hair from China and a dark blue shirt. I was born deaf with sign language. A little bit about my experience in education. I've attended many different schools, including a deaf school, mainstream, college in both China and the United States. I've also worked in a variety of fields throughout my career. I've worked for agencies, colleges, a deaf agency, colleges, universities, and others. I have spent half of my life in China and another half of my life in the United States. And I've studied and experienced the systems between these two countries. And there are many similarities and differences between their educational systems. I'm grateful to Kathy for having the one-year opportunity to come here as a visiting scholar and again, be in the United States and take my accumulative knowledge that I have gained from being here, as well as my experience in China and the learnings I have there, and do a thoughtful comparison of the two countries. From what I have learned, I liken my experience to an ecosystem. And I'll illustrate that by thinking about a field. One area of the field has rich and fertile soil. The other is more compact. When the seedlings are planted on both sides of the fields, both receive the same sunlight, receive the same rain and environmental impact. There is no difference in what they experience. However, one is able to grow and thrive and be ready for harvest, and the other is not. One that is ready to be harvested was from the rich and thriving soil. The seedling planted in the opposite soil did not thrive. I share that because the ecosystem of growing a seedling likens to the deaf experience in China. A deaf child is born. They have goals and dreams for their future. They want a good education. They want good employment. They want to become a parent and have a family. But oftentimes, they don't have language. Because they are born deaf, they are then put into a different ecosystem. So whereas they do not have as many opportunities to achieve a future as they had planned, because they have lack of support. They are in the soil that is more compact and not as rich and fertile. They struggle in their education. They struggle and face barriers throughout their life and upbringing. This is a theory that I have created that relates to the experience of someone deaf in China. But another aspect to consider is language. And I illustrate this by thinking about a bridge. Every bridge is supported by legs or piles. These legs and piles represent the type of support that a deaf person or a bridge needs in order to maintain stability. Education is a leg of a bridge. Language is a leg of a bridge. Policy, culture. Each of these aspects, even deaf culture and sign language usage, all of these are the legs of the bridge that create a diverse ecosystem, even including social attitude, sign language rights, and acceptance of using sign language, and respecting the use of sign language is another leg to this bridge. Access to interpreting services is yet another leg of the bridge. Education in sign language, not just education, but education taught in sign language. Technology is another leg. You have all of these legs on this bridge, and that bridge is stable. So no matter who this deaf child is and where they are born, they're able to walk across that bridge without stumbling, with no challenge, and achieve their dreams. And then they can bring up the next generation of deaf children to do the same. I do think this ties into the challenges that we currently face in China. While we might have one of the piles of the bridge, one other one might not be there. So the bridge right now, as we walk across it as deaf individuals, is unsturdy, and it's easy to fall. My dream is to have a bridge where we have access to everything. We have strong, sturdy legs that support our journeys, and any person in the deaf community can walk across it and achieve what they're looking for. So as a group, as researchers, I know that we can build that bridge with each and every leg that we're looking for so we can have a stable future. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Oh my goodness, a powerful example of what we need for this success in China. And then we have my colleague Xiaorong Zhou, and she will be talking about empowerment and advocacy for the deaf community in China.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here. This is such an honor. Hello, everyone. My name is Xiaorong Zhou. I'm from China. I have shoulder length, black hair, dark brown hair. I wear glasses. I am always smiling. At St. Cloud State University, I am the project coordinator for CDAD. We have our project here in the US, and we have our Chinese deaf community, and I'm a liaison between the two. My goal is for this project to be a success. So, talking about empowerment and advocacy, two things are very important: deaf education and deaf employment, and they go hand in hand. If the education is not up to standards, it will impact future employment for a deaf person. This is an issue in China because oftentimes deaf children experience teachers who are hearing who do not know how to sign, just like was mentioned before. We have lots of teachers that do not know sign language, and in an oppressive way, they don't teach in sign language, they teach using spoken Chinese in a room full of deaf children who then are language deprived because they're not learning in any language. This ensures that they are very behind in their education and they're unable to be successful to further educate themselves in post-secondary settings after they graduate. People in China will look at the deaf community as less than, as unimportant, and this really worsens the situation, and the cycle goes on and on. We don't need that assumption that deaf children will fail from the get-go. This is an issue we've been thinking about for a long time, and we've been thinking about solutions. Empowerment and equity and access and education is critical. We have to advocate. We need all of you. We need to recruit all of you to be advocates and allies to the deaf community in China, whether that be to political officials or people who establish policies, to provide a stronger support, to see that deaf people can they can be successful if these supports are provided to them, if policies are changed in favor of this equitable education that they need from the beginning. These low standards that they have for deaf children currently is not perpetuating success later in life. Deaf children are usually funneled into two majors once they get to post-secondary education, and that's usually computer science or art. They are limited to those two choices. If they want to go into the medical field or the legal field or have dreams of other jobs, they cannot do so. They must go into art, and remember, there are 20 million deaf people in China, so there is a long line to get into those art programs and those computer science programs. And so in the meantime, they need to have employment, and so they go into factory jobs in China. In those jobs, they're unable to advance and go up the ladder, the corporate ladder, if you will, and get into management positions. They're limited there in their employment opportunities. And so those employment opportunities need to also be equitable for deaf individuals in China. That is another goal that we have, another dream in empowerment and advocacy. Just like we have in education, we need to recruit all of you and all of your support to talk to those policymakers as well. As I think of this, I think about a dandelion. The dandelion, you know, has the fluffy white seeds in a ball, and when the wind blows, those seeds scatter, and they scatter across the field. And those seeds then become other dandelions that grow and grow and grow, and that's what we want to see in the deaf community as well. Those deaf children being successful and growing. It's tough. It's a challenging situation. Kathy and my fellow researchers up here on the panel, we were invited, this group was invited, and they were thrilled to be here, and came running when they had the opportunity to study what you're doing here in America, to learn from your educational system of the deaf community, of interpreters, and take that back to impact the educational system, the employment system, to make things more inclusive in China. So that's our hope. That's what we want to accomplish. I'd love more of you to become allies and advocates and to join us in this endeavor. We want more diplomacy, and we'd like to grow this group of people that are working towards improvement in China. So thank you for listening to me. I hope that you become part of the empowerment and advocacy that we are working so strongly towards. And I recruit you. If you don't want to be recruited, I'm recruiting you anyway. Thank you.
Wonderful, Xiaorong. Thank you so much. It was a beautiful. Okay, and next we called you a global citizen. I hope you're okay with that.
That's all right.
Todd McKean from Apple is here to share also about a similar topic with all of us, employment for the deaf.
Thank you. Yeah, I spoke. My name is Todd McKean, for those of you who weren't here earlier. I am wearing a dark blue suit. I'm not as tall when I'm sitting down. I still have gray hair and still need to lose about 20 pounds, but that is definitely something for the new year. As I mentioned earlier, and I think my introduction earlier, I have spent 35 years of my life living and working in China. I'm actually the third generation of my family to live and work in China. My grandparents went to China. Although the term was used a little bit later, the term sort of serves serve the people was definitely what my grandparents went to do. My grandmother was a nurse. My grandfather was a teacher. My mother was born in China. Their family left China in the late 40s. But as I grew up, learning about China from my grandparents, hearing about China, and then finally having an opportunity to go to China in 1981, I was just captivated by a place I'd heard about for so long, but which now has become probably not even a second home, more of a first home, I would say. I think I've been fortunate to work for some really great companies. I was at Nike in the 90s. I was part of a team that actually wrote any industry's first code of conduct for labor standards in factories. I started working in the 90s to provide education opportunity, to ensure compliance to basic labor standards, to institute environment, sustainability programming before many companies were talking about it for sure. Very few others were talking about it. And I've been fortunate to be able to do that work sort of on and off since then. I spoke a little bit earlier about the program that we've developed to focus on providing opportunities to persons with disabilities. And I think, to Xiaorong's point, a big part of what my team is doing, regardless of whether it is for persons with disabilities or persons who do not have disabilities, is really ensuring that people who have an opportunity to work in our supply chain also have an opportunity to be inspired to go further, to have more opportunity. It's been really exciting to see those people who've joined many of our programs. All of them are very much designed to allow that worker, that operator, who very often is entering a factory environment, much like the United States and other places around the world, starting at sort of an operator or basic skill level role, to provide more opportunity to grow to become a junior technician, a mid-level technician, a master technician, to learn how to code. We've trained more than 30,000 workers on how to code. There's actually 29 apps on the Apple App Store now that were designed by factory workers who are able to then take that skill not only to enhance the work that they're doing at the factory, but I think some of them have also started their own coding and app development businesses. So those are some of the examples. I think we also talked a little bit earlier about some of the challenges we faced. Quite honestly, I think many suppliers who were previously not familiar with hiring persons with disabilities and joined us on that road, their bias starting out was that probably there were just a handful of roles in a facility that someone with a disability was able to do. And I think some of the most significant work that we've done is to actually do a broad job mapping exercise across many different types of factories. We have some that are assembling products. We have some that are designing, manufacturing components and so forth. And we now have, I think, over 180 job types, depending on a person's given disability, that we know someone was able to do with, just like any other role, with sufficient training and experience, and be very successful and be able to go and advance along their career. And I think it's been great. I also told this story about the facility that thought they were not able to communicate effectively, but it was really on them for not engaging and hiring a sign language interpreter, although it was quite honestly just a year ago when I met Kathy and we started to, it wasn't even a year ago, months ago, and the scholars here, that I was just shocked to find that there's not even 200 official sign language interpreters to serve 22 million people. I'm not sure why that surprised me, other than the fact that, my own kind of experience coming and growing up when I was younger in the United States and knowing and experiencing sign language interpreters in school for classmates, at universities, at hospitals. I was amazed. And I think that's something too that really encouraged me to try to have this program continue to grow and develop, to make sure that the program's successful. Because if the program's not successful for that employee, it's not going to be successful for the employer, and the employer is not going to want to continue with the program. And so I always feel there's a significant sense of urgency to make sure that we're doing more, we're always learning, we're always kind of pushing the edge of what people say is possible, because we know that it's important.
Okay, excellent. Well said. I think it was in March or April when we met.
I think so. Yeah, and then had the opportunity to meet you in May.
Yes.
For the first time in person.
That was it.
At St. Cloud, and had a great day with you all.
And then you went and presented at a conference
That's right.
in China.
In China, that's right. Yeah.
So we've been
We're inextricably linked, whether you like it or not, Kathy.
Yes. And we're very thankful for the support of Todd and Apple to have him come here and be a part of this presentation. If you heard earlier in his presentation, Apple has hired about 8,000.
That's right.
Right? And so that's a significant number of people. And we're hoping that through our collaboration, we'll also have opportunities for leadership positions for the deaf community who is hired within the corporation and the whole sustainable program model as talked about. So
and that's also just beyond that. That's throughout our supply chain, I will say. As our, Apple badge, what we call Apple badged employees in China, we actually have quite a large cohort of persons with disabilities, and many of them are deaf and doing a variety of roles, individual contributor roles, leadership roles, and so forth.
It's a great model to follow. So at the very beginning of this, I shared about deaf diplomacy, and one of the outcomes that we really aspire to have is for each of our visiting scholars to take on the role of becoming an ambassador. And I was really excited to see that the US State Department actually started a deaf diplomacy initiative just this last spring. They had 4 aims to their initiative. The first one, sharing best practices for including deaf colleagues in the work of diplomacy. The second was serving deaf visa applicants. All of ours obviously got their visas to come to the United States. We were very happy about that. Then we had accessible exchanges for deaf participants and deaf scholars like we have here today. And then the fourth aim was discussing accommodations to ensure accessibility and inclusion. But I would go further and really hope to work with the State Department to say that diplomacy doesn't stop at the door when they're done in the embassy, at the visit or in the visa exchange or whatever. For us, diplomacy has been actively pursued all year in all of the learning that they've been having the opportunity to participate in. And when they go back home, we really hope that they'll be able to take that new knowledge and their new expertise and take on leadership roles within their higher ed institutions. Part of the challenge is that the leaders in the institutions tend to be hearing and making the decisions that impact the deaf community and the curriculum and the graduation and the certification. So we're really aspiring to have, no pressure, all of you, but to have them really be a part of the change that will impact the 20 million deaf people in China. One of our Minnesota senators, Paul Wellstone was his name. He shared a comment that Senator Harkin really likes, and I don't see Senator Harkin here, but I know he would enjoy this. We all do better when we all do better. And that was a quote from Senator Paul Wellstone from Minnesota. And another approach that people look at to have us all do better is people with disabilities tend to say, we need to have a seat at the table. And I say, yes, that's great, but where's the interpreter in that room for those who are at the table? And so it's really looking at access and equity, like Wei Lu had shared about. It's looking at and reflecting upon education, as Shengquan talked about. And then, obviously, Guowei with the ecosystem. It impacts from the day that baby is born. I remember being a teacher for deaf and hard of hearing and working with brand new babies in the home, teaching the parents sign language. And then the empowerment opportunity and for going back home. And I think about this because of that. I think I've been to China about 80 times. I've never lived there, but I should have a home. But when we leave a country, we pack our suitcases. Maybe we have some gifts in our suitcases, right, that we want to bring back. And when we get home, we can unpack our suitcase and clean it up and start to get adjusted to being home again. But what gets packed, especially for all of these individuals all year long, is that new knowledge in their head. And we haven't figured out with AI how to download that new knowledge in our heads. And it's unpacking that new knowledge in the ecosystem where they don't fit. And so that's where our support team comes in. And we look at having and hosting visiting scholars, not just as the 1 year. And we really, through deaf diplomacy, need to think about how are we supporting them when they get back. And by all means, we want them to, I would love for them to stay for 5 years, but we want them to go back and be the change agents in the whole advocacy work that they now are learning about. And so we're very thankful for the sponsorship. And I think we had 2 of our colleagues from China that just came in and arrived. Thank you. I'm sorry if you had problems finding the room. We have a couple minutes left. And I would like to ask each one of you if you could share, what is your hope for the future for deaf citizens in China? Xiaorong, could you start? What is your hope for deaf citizens in China?
This is Xiaorong. Well, I would hope, as I am here in the US, that we can bring everything that we've learned to empower the deaf community, to empower teachers to learn sign language, to empower employers to provide what they need. We want more people from China coming here to study and research and learn what they need to do to apply back home. We need more exposure to them and the deaf community in China. That's my hope.
Guowei, what is your hope for the future of deaf citizens?
I know there's a lot of work to be done and that we will face challenges, but my hope is not too lofty. I know that we can make it happen if we just try, but I think the biggest challenge is the system and making a change within the system. But like you've mentioned, bringing back our knowledge, unpacking our knowledge suitcase, if you will, and doing something with that. For me, there are 3 things that I've thought about. Helping the deaf community, helping hearing people know how to work together with the deaf community. And third, having deaf individuals learn autonomy and self-advocacy. It is my hope that that third aspect can happen, because I know that the first 2 that I mentioned will take time and are probably going to be more challenging. So my hope would be the third one, that deaf people all over China can continue to be empowered.
Thank you. Very well stated. Wei Lu, just real briefly, can you share what your hope is?
This is Wei Lu. Well, going back to China, I am at Hangzhou University, and I would like to set up an interpreter gathering, social gatherings with interpreters in the university that are in the education program, with interpreting companies out in the community, with disability providers, the disability community. I would like to just start with a social gathering where we can all get together, learn from each other, and grow.
And that's what you happened to do. One second. That's what you happened to do last night. You went to an event where lots of interpreters were together. So thank you, Washington, D.C., for that opportunity last night. Okay, Shengquan.
We sure did.
This morning, as I came into the conference today, like I said, I was feeling nervous. but I always have to tell myself that I can do it. Regardless of who you are, deaf individual, disabled person, you can do it. That's my hope.
Yes. So thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate you coming. Hey.